Hello there. I'm Paul Glumaz, and um, I'm with the political movement of Lyndon LaRouche, and today is the 10th, Sunday, the 10th of June. And this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents, and that is indeed what the issue is, the general welfare. What is in the interest of the general welfare? And a lot of what's going on right now doesn't make any sense. The flamboyant president that we have just, made a mess of the G7 meeting up in Quebec. But, media headlines and all of that, you really don't get a full sense of what the real situation is. So today I'm going to discuss all the strategic events from the lens of something that I learned a long time ago. The British call organized criminal associations mediating structures. And the reason they're called mediating structures is that they mediate between you, the person, and the government. They are outside the government and they mediate. They're criminal organizations and they mediate. Take for instance, in the 1700s, you had 1600s, 1700s. You had pirates of the Caribbean. They were mediating structures in the global shipping industry. They made it necessary for you to go to the bankers to get insurance, to pay for insurance for your shipping. And in many cases, they probably got a little kickback from the insurance companies or from the insurers. And that was one of the major financial activity that you would do, would be to insure. And everywhere there was in this late 1500s, early 1600s, everywhere there was a Spanish galleon, there was a Sir Francis Drake or somebody like that, getting ready to pounce on the Spaniards. They had to hide what they were doing because, they were mediating structures. They were out to mediate between them and their king. The mediating structures being the pirates. They were mediating between you and the king. They were getting what the king was supposed to be getting, or you weren't getting what you were getting because they were mediating structures getting in the way. So the British call organized criminal organizations mediating structures. And I say that because what I want to talk about is the four things that are related. Mediating structures, unmediated, intermediated, which is a whole group of processes which are integral to something. So there's intermediated as opposed to mediated. Intermediated means that there's a process like a production process or the process of selling something. There's a number of different elements involved in the process. And this is between an action or between two parties, right? Between two parties there are mediations. And then there's intermediation. And then when the two parties acted independently without mediation, it's called unmediated. And then there's something called disintermediated, which is when you have a mediation structure and the participant decides to go directly and disintermediate the situation. Now, why am I talking like this? Okay, and that is, you have to understand that since the end of World War II, and especially since the death of Kennedy, the British system, which is this global financial system, has been increasingly creating mediating structures that are not related to the general welfare. So here we are, General Welfare Presents, and there are mediating structures that are not connected to the general welfare. Organized criminal activity is not really connected to the general welfare of a population. Mediating structures that have been created and have become dominant are not connected to the general welfare of a people or a nation. Now, there are mediating structures that have a connection to the general welfare historically. Farm associations or farmers have a connection to the general welfare because they're doing something which is in the general welfare. Therefore, their associations which act on their behalf have a relationship to the general welfare. The same with trade unions. The welfare and condition of the workforce is something that a trade union is concerned with, and therefore their mediation into the political process is actually beneficial to the nation, or potentially beneficial to the nation. Then you have industrialists. The industrialists have a reason to want to have a decent workforce and an infrastructure and what have you, and they tend to have a relation to the general welfare. And then you have commercial bankers that have to lend money to all of this activity, and they generally have a positive relationship to the general welfare. And then there are many other associations which have positive relationship to the general welfare. That's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about those mediating structures that have nothing to do with the general welfare. In fact, for the most part, they have everything to do with destroying the general welfare or preventing the realization of the general welfare. Okay, now we'll start off with an example. Political parties tend to be sometimes in the general welfare and sometimes not. But they tend to become mediating structures that take the political process away from a discussion of the dialogue or discussion of the general welfare. A lot of the single issues, everything from abortion to gun rights to gay rights to Black Lives Matter, to 100 of these issues that people get connected to, are not essentially connected to the general welfare. These issues, when they are raised, tend to be divisive, and they tend to align people, but those people are not united, become further removed from the general welfare by being totally passionately involved in these issues. And then there are those who are watching the spectacle of all of this, and they become, well, the general welfare is not being addressed. Then you have the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which has been a very significant mediating structure, a criminally mediating structure, in attacking or framing up or murdering those people in the political process, or blackmailing those people in the political process who are trying to unite a population around a conception of the general welfare. So all those politicians who were capable of uniting the nation around the conception of the general welfare, meaning progress, meaning primarily economic progress, not just lip service, would tend to be targeted by these mediating structures. Then you have the media, which is a huge mediating structure, in that they define what are the issues and obscure what are other issues that are more important for the general welfare. And so you have essentially, these mediating structures have been growing increasingly since especially the time of Kennedy's death. The Cold War created a vast network of mediating structures involved in the Cold War that had nothing to do with the general welfare, but had to do with this adversarial relationship, to the point that you could not have the United States and the Soviet Union get together and sit down and say, hey, what's in our general interest? Or any of those countries who are in the blocs from sitting down with the countries of the other countries and saying, well, what's in our general interest? What's in the general welfare? What's our general welfare question? So the whole Cold War and all its institutions were effectively a mediating structure that defined how a head of state was going to behave towards the opposite bloc. And when various heads of state sought to break out of that and have a direct relationship, like Kennedy or Ronald Reagan or Clinton or others, they got nailed to the wall. So the control is in the mediating structures. Then you have the offshore international financial system, which is not in the general welfare. It's not industry. It's looting industry. It's not the worker. It's looting the worker. It's not the farmer. It's looting the farmer. This international and financial system, which is also the drug trade, is also a mediating structure. Okay. And so all these mediating structures are then you have all of the think tanks, the academics, the PhD experts that you see here about. They're also mediating structures. Their opinion is more valuable than anyone else, and you have to listen to their opinion if you're a political leader, and if you don't, then you're an ignoramus or whatever. Then you have all these NGOs, international NGOs, George Soros. These are mediating structures. All of them. They're mediating structures of one kind or another. They're private. They have proliferated massively in the last 30 years. Every country gets invaded by them. Some countries have to kick them out. And these include environmental organizations who are also mediating structures. But the environmentalists are also connected to the oil companies, to the oil lobbies, because there's a game being played. Where these corporations are making a profit by preventing the development of new technologies and so forth. So you have all these mediating structures, and you have the last thing is the question of what is in the interest of the nation as a whole. What is it that we have to do? What is it that we have to do to improve the condition of life of our people? What scientific and technological progress do we need to invest in? What kind of infrastructure do we need to invest in? All of that it has to go through mediating structures that are not interested in the general welfare, but have another interest of the empire, interest of this financial or global new world order crowd or what have you. And then they have all these organizations created to bring countries together, like NAFTA and the European Union. And it's not Mexico and Canada and the United States sitting down, the leader of Mexico, the leader of Canada, the leader of the United States sitting down and saying, okay, what can we work together? Can we work together in our own interests? No. The whole NAFTA system is a system of rules imposed upon the United States, Canada, and Mexico, which are governed by the financial system, which are governed by the international corporations for their benefit. Okay, and then they got Clinton to pass it, and the Canadian to pass it, the Mexican, they pressured and lobbied, and they created this. But the president of Mexico and the president of the United States and the prime minister of Canada didn't sit down and say, okay, what do you want? What does your country need? This is what we need. This is how we can help one another. No, that's not NAFTA. Okay? That's not NAFTA. Same in the European Union. They got everybody into this system, and now you can't invest in infrastructure because you're held to a 3% of the budget deficit, and you can't create your own. You don't have control over your own country. You're being mediated by the Brussels bureaucracy of the European Union, and that's to keep you underdeveloped. Then lastly, you have this vast mediating system of mercenary armies all over the world who are run by the empire, targeting nations and causing all kinds of havoc, hundreds of, millions, tens of millions of refugees that just piling into Europe. some into Latin America, some in the U.S., and you got the equivalent with the drug lords and being mediating structures and the distribution networks in the United States, which is all part of the financial system. So how do you represent the general welfare in this context? Now let's look at a politician. Politicians come up through the ranks. Either they're brought in by the party or they have to join the party. But what does a politician do? If a politician is honest in this period, or in the last, since the death of Kennedy, the politician has to say the system doesn't work. The system is heading in the wrong direction. This is not the general welfare. But instead, the politicians are made to accommodate to all these mediating structures. You have to get money for your campaigns. You have to figure out and triangulate all the issues that the media are presenting, where your constituency represents, and then you got to somehow dance around them in such a way that you appear to be the least offensive of all the candidates. And over time, the population begins to believe that there's no difference really, except some minor difference, and the question is which candidate is. So then they build up the personality issue, so the personality issue becomes primary, not the general welfare. You know, the personal life of these people becomes more important because it's not the general welfare of the nation, and so on and so forth. It's just one pile of crap upon another pile of crap. And after a while, people just say, well, you know, what the hell? What am I doing voting? Well, I have to vote because this other guy is worse than this guy. Or this other woman is better than this guy. And so on and so forth. And then the politicians develop this incredible capability of appearing to be very concerned, but can't say anything. So they develop this polished persona that goes with a politician that is like bulletproof. I mean, you can't stick anything on these guys. They know how to dance around any question or anything that you propose. They become, you know, super dancers. You know, super. You can't get them. They're like Muhammad Ali. You know, you can't touch them. You know, and so forth. And so at a certain point, the people just say, screw all of this. And then along comes an individual who says, okay, who is not been mediated. He has disintermediated everything. His name is Donald Trump. And the Donald Trump phenomena is a profound rejection of this whole system on a deep level. And the point about Donald Trump is that he had already a perceived relationship through his apprentice show. So a lot of people saw that show. A lot of people developed a conception of him, which was a direct conception that was not mediated by the advertising, was not mediated by all of the experts and the consultants and all of the makeup people and all of that. He had a direct relationship. So that direct relationship expanded as he went into the Republican primaries and beyond, and he developed a support, and that support has remained pretty much the same throughout because he is not depend on any mediation. He has a direct relationship with the population. Now, I say this to you because they're going all out to destroy Donald Trump. They have, the Justice Department, this guy, from Alabama, Jeff Sessions, he basically said, oh yeah, this is too much for me. I'm not going to be part of this. Go ahead, do whatever you want. And so you have the entire Justice Department going after him. You have the Democrats, you have the Republicans totally opposed to him. The Republicans are trying to stab him in the back. The Democrats are trying to have him impeached. The media has a negative story on him every day, every hour of the day, and he isn't losing any support. So what the hell is that? Have you ever seen that before? No. It's because the whole system of mediation and intermediation of political systems by non-general welfare issues and concerns has created a situation where the population is just saying, okay, we're going to go with this guy. We're going to stay with him because he's not playing. He's not mediating. He genuinely seems to care about the general welfare. But how is he going to do anything when the financial system controls everything? How is he going to do anything when the military is off the rocker? How is he going to do anything with all his advisors are all assholes? I mean, how's he going to go? Well, he can only go one way because he doesn't have any support among those people. He has only support in the people who have been loyal to him, because he is not mediated. He has a direct relationship to the people. Now, how does this go into international affairs? Now, this is very important. All the experts, everybody saying, "Oh, he's going to go to war. He's not going to go to war." Why did he do the thing with Jerusalem? Well, he did it because he promised a group that supported him that he would do it, so he fulfilled his promise. That it may not have been the right thing, but he building a wall. Is building a wall a great idea? Probably not, but he promised his constituents that he would build a wall. So he's carrying out his promises. Why is that necessary from his standpoint? Because those are the people that voted for him, and those are the people that still support him. And he has to maintain a certain degree of trust with them. Otherwise, he's going to get nailed. He's going to be lynched. He knows that. So, what about foreign policy? You have all these mediating structures of foreign policy, the Council on Foreign Relations, and 1,001 institutions, and book think tanks, and transatlantic this and that, and everything. He doesn't care about all of that. How does Donald Trump conduct foreign policy? He wants to know who the leader of a country is. He wants to know who's in charge, and he wants to talk to them. Why? Because he doesn't want any mediation. He doesn't want all these people trying to mediate, because none of them have anything to do with the general welfare of the United States or the general welfare of the nation that he's talking about. So if he's going to have anything to work out, he's got to work it out with them. And that is what's happened. That's what's happening. He wants to meet with Putin. Why does he want to meet with Putin? Because Putin is the guy in charge. And only with you talk to the guy in charge, with the other guy in charge, can you decide what's in the interest of both of you. But the problem is the media is telling everybody out there that he's not in charge. And to some degree, that's a problem. So all these world leaders are saying, well, to what degree is anything we do with Trump going to be of any value if he's not in charge? So this massive Russia thing is all about not just getting rid of Trump, but also, if they can't get rid of Trump, it's about destroying Trump's ability to represent the United States in the leadership of other countries. Now, all of that could change in a few days with the North Korea situation. However, this is the way Trump is operating. He has an unmediated relationship with Xi Jinping. He has an unmediated relationship with Abe. He's seeking an unmediated relationship with Putin and with other world leaders. That is how Trump is conducting policy. Because only when you talk to the people who are in a position of being responsible for the general welfare of their respective nations can you make a deal that is in the interest of your respective nation, your nation and the respective nation. So Donald Trump comes up to Canada and he finds, he does this, tariff thing, and then he's poking around, and he finds that that there's nobody that he can really talk to make a deal with in Canada. Of course, Canada's part of the British Empire. He's being called a revanchist, or Putin is being called a dictator and a what are called revisionist. Xi Jinping is being called a dictator and a revisionist, and Trump is being called, somewhat a would-be dictator and possibly a revisionist. Now, what do they mean by revisionist? What does that have to do with anything? Well, revisionist means they're reviving the nation state. That terrible, horrible institution. And disrupting the global order. Damn straight. That's what we want to do. We want to disrupt the global order. And that's what this Italian election was all about. Disrupting the global order. So you can get something done for your country. And that's what's going on. So, yeah, it's revisionist. It's totalitarian. Damn straight it's totalitarian. What's in the interest of our nation? The general welfare. How do we define the general welfare? Well, this is how we define the general welfare. To increase better life condition of the population. Oh, that's dictatorship. That's totalitarianism. How dare you make a decision that you know what's good for people? Why don't you let their banal instincts decide for them? Why don't you let their desire for sex decide for them? Why don't you let them find their own way in a rotten system? How dare you intervene on behalf of the general welfare? How dare you? That's dictatorship. You know? So Trump is up against all of this stuff. Trump is up against all of it. And the way he's approaching it is not to have the mediation of all these insane and all of these policies and entities and discussion that has nothing to do with the general welfare. So that's what you're dealing with. That's the situation. And that's my discussion, brief discussion on the concept of mediation, unmediated, intermediated, and disintermediated.